Daisy, your contract was terminated this morning. Leave. That was the text waiting for me at 8:57 a.m. Sharp, short, clinical, cowardly. I stared at it while the elevator doors closed, sealing me in chrome and silence. My reflection looked back. Black blazer, hair perfectly pinned, the same pearl earrings my grandmother used to say were meant for a woman who knew her worth. I didn't react. Didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Instead, I slid my phone into my pocket and pressed the button for floor 27, boardroom level. The place where decisions were made. Or, if my plan held, the place where decisions would be undone. I still remember my first day here. I was 27, fresh out of grad school, and the CEO shook my hand like he already owned my future. "You're going to do big things here, Daisy," he'd said. Back then, I believed him. Now, 8 years later, that same man couldn't even bother to fire me face-to-face cute. At 9:01 a.m., the elevator chimed. I stepped out and felt the energy shift immediately. Not the dramatic kind. No hushed whispers or gasps. But the subtle kind. The kind that comes from people suddenly avoiding eye contact, from conversations ending half a second too fast. People always underestimate silence. Silence tells you everything. My heels echoed down the hallway. Steady, controlled, intentional. A rhythm drum tight with tension. As I approached the boardroom, the glass walls reflected faces already seated inside. Executives, board members, and Brandon, our newly promoted CFO, whose ego barely fit inside the building. He was the reason I got that text. The golden boy, the CEO's protege. The man who thought titles equaled intelligence, or power, or both. I opened the boardroom door without knocking. Every head snapped toward me. Brandon choked on air. "D. Daisy?" His voice cracked. "You're not supposed to be here." I smiled. Not a warm smile, not a friendly one. The kind you give right before checkmate. "Oh? That's interesting," I said calmly. "My calendar says otherwise." Let me be clear. I wasn't surprised by the firing. I'd seen it coming 3 months ago, sudden secret meetings. Missing email access I previously had. My name disappearing from invitation lists I used to be required in. The soft betrayal always comes quietly. Not like thunder, but like humidity. You don't notice until you can't breathe. So I prepared. Quietly. Precisely. Relentlessly. Because the first rule of corporate survival is simple. Never let someone take from you what they didn't build with you. Back in the boardroom, Brandon exchanged a panicked look with the CEO. She looked irritated, like I was an inconvenience, not a threat. "Daisy," she exhaled, standing. "You were notified. You're no longer—" I interrupted her. Not loudly, not aggressively, just efficiently. "I'll stay." A few people winced. People who knew me well enough to recognize that tone. The CEO stiffened. "This is a closed executive meeting." "It is," I agreed, walking toward my seat. The one I'd sat in every Monday for 3 years. And I am still an executive. Brandon barked a laugh. Not because he thought it was funny, but because panic has to escape somehow. "No, Daisy. You were terminated this morning. HR is packaging your—" The door burst open. The company's senior lawyer, Harold Finch, gray suit, sweating, holding a laptop like it was radioactive, stumbled inside. His eyes landed on me. He froze. "Ma'am," he breathed, voice cracking. "That's your authorization on the buyout agreement." The room went still. No one moved. No one spoke. Brandon turned pale. The CEO blinked, confused, then furious. "That's impossible," she snapped. "She doesn't have the authority." Harold shook his head. "She does." He swallowed. Hard. "The transfer paperwork is valid. Timestamp verified. Internal registry confirmed." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was loud. Heavy. I sat down. Slowly. Gracefully. Like the seat had always belonged to me. The CEO slammed her palm against the table. "Call forensics now." People jolted like they'd been shocked. I simply folded my hands. "By all means," I murmured. "Call whoever you need." Because while they scrambled, while they panicked, While they tried to undo what had already been sealed in ink, timestamp, and legal protocol, I already knew the truth. This wasn't the day they fired me. This was the day I stopped working for them and started taking back what they tried to steal. And by 1 p.m., they would understand something they should have known all along. You never underestimate the woman who built the system. The first person to break after the CEO's outburst wasn't Brandon. It was the board chair. Elaine Wu. Sharp. Calculated. A woman who rarely reacted to emotional chaos. She leaned forward, hands clasped, voice calm enough to slice through panic. "Harold," she said, addressing the lawyer. "Explain. Slowly." You could have heard dust settle. Harold adjusted his glasses, opened the laptop, and turned the screen toward the board. "The system shows a triggering event," he said. "Stamped at 8:04 this morning." He swallowed. "Tied to a dormant executive buyout clause." The CEO scoffed. "We never approved any dormant buyout clause." But Harold didn't look at her. He looked at me, because he remembered. 6 years ago, long before Brandon strutted into his CFO role, long before restructuring and vision realignment, the company nearly collapsed. A failed merger, crumbling morale, lawsuits threatening to swallow us whole. Back then, I wasn't just an analyst. I was the person they handed everything messy and whispered, "Fix it," so I did. I streamlined redundancies, rebuilt contract language, and, most importantly, I added protective mechanisms no one read because everyone was too panicked to care. Because sometimes protecting a corporation means protecting its backbone, and at that time, that backbone was me. Elaine tapped the table once. "Harold, continue." He exhaled. "The clause states, if the employee named is terminated without due process and without board approval, ownership rights default to her as interim controlling shareholder until a full review." A beat. Then another. You could see the recognition spread across faces like wildfire, finally touching dry brush. They hadn't fired me properly. They thought a text message was enough. I didn't smile. Not yet. Not here. The CEO finally found words. "That clause can't just activate. It must require board signatures. Arbitration review." Harold shook his head. "It would, normally." He clicked one line on the screen. A scanned document filled the projector behind them. Clean, crisp, numbered, initialed my initials. And two others, Elaine's and the CEO's, dated years ago. No one breathed. Brandon shot up from his chair the way a person leaps from a chair they thought was stable. "This is absurd," he snapped. "No one is giving her control of executive shares because of some ancient panic clause." Elaine's gaze shifted to him. Not angry, but disappointed. "Brandon," she said softly, "you signed the termination order without board review. You did that." Silence dropped so heavy it felt like gravity thickened. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I didn't look. I already knew what it was. A system alert. Ownership routing confirmed. The CEO leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Daisy," she said, voice smooth now. Too smooth. "There must be a misunderstanding. If we reverse the termination—" I raised a hand. "No." Her smile faltered. Brandon scoffed. "Don't get emotional. We can fix this." I finally looked at him. "Brandon," I said, calm as still water. "The only reason you're panicking is because you thought you won." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Because the worst weapon in a room full of egos isn't anger. It's certainty. Elaine cleared her throat, the moderator returning. "What documentation triggered the clause, Harold?" He scrolled. "A digital authorization uploaded from Daisy's credentials at 7:59 a.m. today." Brandon pounced. "She sabotaged the system then." But Harold shook his head again. "No, the protocol requires pre-existing authorization, notarized verification, and independent witness logging. All 3 checks passed." The CEO's voice was barely audible. "Meaning?" Harold closed the laptop. "Meaning nothing about this was forged. Nothing was added after the fact." A pause. "She didn't trigger it today. She set it up years ago. It simply executed when the conditions you created were met." Someone in the back whispered, very softly, "Oh my God." Finally, I spoke. Not loudly, Not with heat, just truth. 6 months ago, you started reducing my access. 3 faces flushed. You removed me from strategy meetings, then from financial oversight, then from legal queue review. I leaned back slightly. That told me everything. You were preparing to replace me quietly, without severance, without recognition, without accountability. No one contradicted me. They couldn't. And when people show you they don't value you, I continued, you don't beg them to change. My voice lowered. You make sure they can't erase you. For a long moment, no one dared speak. Then Elaine turned toward me. Daisy, she said carefully, what do you intend to do now? My pulse didn't spike. My breath didn't shake. My answer had been waiting long before this day arrived. I intend, I said, to ensure this company stops treating its people like disposable tools. The CEO swallowed hard, finally understanding. This wasn't revenge, it was consequence. And consequences, unlike apologies, can't be undone. The boardroom didn't erupt the way people imagine. There was no shouting match, no dramatic walkouts, no thrown papers. The real fallout was quieter, tighter, more dangerous. Shock isn't loud. It's still. The CEO finally sank into her leather chair, spine rigid, jaw clamped. She wasn't just angry. She was calculating. I knew that look. The same one predators use when prey unexpectedly bites back, Elaine remained composed, hands folded neatly, watching the room. Not to understand what was happening, but to see who would break first. It was Brandon. Of course. So what? He snapped, pacing now. She gets temporary control because of a loophole? We can still challenge this. We can fight it. Harold didn't look up from his laptop as he muttered, you can challenge it, but contesting a verified clause will require a public filing. Brandon stopped mid-step. A public filing? The CEO repeated, voice low. Harold nodded. Yes, SEC review, media inquiry, shareholder disclosure. Silence again. Heavier now. This wasn't just about me. This was about exposure. Corporate decisions whispered in hallways, undisclosed bonuses, questionable advancements. Suddenly at risk, Brandon swallowed hard. That could sink stock projections. Harold nodded once. And if the clause stands, and it will, that means she retains administrative control while the courts review it. So she runs the company while we challenge? Brandon hissed. No, Harold corrected, finally meeting his eyes. She owns it. I watched panic settle across their faces. Not dramatic, not chaotic, but internal. The kind that rearranges someone's understanding of reality. The CEO finally spoke. Quiet but sharp. What exactly do you want, Daisy? Not the question of a leader. The question of someone negotiating with a threat. I met her eyes. I want an honest conversation. Something I haven't received here in months. She scoffed. You were never excluded. We were restructuring. No, I said, voice steady. You were eliminating anyone who didn't serve your new hierarchy. Anyone who could question you. Her expression wavered, just enough to confirm it. Brandon crossed his arms. So what? Now you're going to rewrite the rules? Fire everyone? Replace leadership? It was tempting. Too easy. But vengeance wasn't why I walked in here. You think this is about humiliation, I said slowly. About getting even. But I didn't fight my way to the table to burn the building down. I paused. I fought because people like you assume loyalty should come without respect. His jaw tightened. Good. That landed. Elaine shifted forward slightly, directing the conversation. Daisy, if this clause stands, you have authority to take immediate action. But I need clarity. Are you stepping into leadership or simply holding the position until review? I knew the answer before she finished speaking. I'm stepping in. No hesitation. No apology. I'd already done the work for years, just without the title. At that exact moment, my phone buzzed again. This time I checked. A notification from the internal compliance portal. System alert. Ownership transfer registration complete. Another line. New permissions assigned. Full administrative access reinstated. I placed the phone face down on the table, then looked around the room, slowly, letting the weight of the moment stand. "You tried to remove me quietly," I said, and I responded quietly. A beat. "But now that the process is legal and public, we will proceed transparently." The CEO exhaled through her teeth, part anger, part acceptance. "What happens next?" she asked. I didn't soften. "There will be an internal audit of leadership decisions from the last 12 months. Brandon paled. "And until the audit is complete," I continued, "no executive terminations, promotions, financial reallocations, or restructuring changes will move forward." The CEO tapped the table once. Not agreement, not resistance, just acknowledgement. Finally, Elaine stood. "We'll reconvene tomorrow morning with a full legal outline. Daisy, until then, you are acting chair." Brandon whispered something under his breath. I heard it anyway. She was never supposed to win. I turned toward him, calm, collected, unshaken. I didn't win. My voice stayed low, measured. "You just lost because you underestimated the wrong person." As the board members stood and slowly filed out, no one looked at me with dismissal anymore. They looked with calculation, recognition, unease, respect. I gathered my pen, just one, placed it neatly in my bag, and stood. 9 hours earlier, they thought they could erase me with a message. Now, before noon, the company wasn't just listening. It was mine. But this wasn't the end. It was the beginning, and tomorrow the real work would start. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because of adrenaline or fear, but because power changes things. People, dynamics, plans. And overnight, the quiet rumble of what happened spread through the company like electricity through exposed wire. No announcement had been made yet, but offices have their own nervous system. Whispers, Slack messages, private group chats, calendar updates disappearing without explanation. By morning, everyone knew something. Just not which way gravity now tilted. I arrived at the building at 8:12 a.m., not early, not late, precisely as I always had. My badge, once deactivated, now unlocked the doors so fast the scanner beeped twice. A subtle apology from the system. In the lobby, employees glanced up at me in quick, darted movements. Some confused, some curious, others worried. People remember who stood with them. People also remember who didn't. As I reached the elevator, a voice called softly behind me. "Daisy?" I turned. It was Mia, junior data analyst, barely mid-20s, always the first one in and the last one out, holding this company together in ways leadership never noticed. She clutched a blue folder like a lifeline. Her voice trembled. "I heard you... Well, I don't know what I heard. Is it true?" I held her gaze. "That depends. What version did you hear?" "That they tried to fire you," she whispered. "And now you're running things?" She didn't say it with fear. She said it with hope. I nodded once. "I'm acting chair until review. Possibly longer." Her shoulders dropped. Not in relief, but in something close to vindication. "That's good," she said quietly. "You're fair." Then after a beat, "Most of us needed that." She didn't wait for a response. She walked away before confidence could betray her. The elevator doors opened and I stepped inside, feeling the shift. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was responsibility. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock. When I walked in at 8:59, the room was already full. No one ignored me now. Elaine acknowledged me with the smallest nod. The CEO avoided eye contact. Brandon looked like someone had swallowed his confidence and left him with the shell. Harold cleared his throat. "Before we begin," he said, "I need to confirm for the record that the ownership transfer has passed legal verification and cannot be overturned without court-mandated cause." He looked at me. "And there is no cause." Silence. Then Elaine turned to me. "Daisy, the floor is yours." The gravity of that sentence wasn't lost on anyone I stood, not dramatically, just deliberately, and placed a printed folder at the center of the table. "A year ago," I began, employee satisfaction surveys were quietly archived instead of reviewed. A flicker of surprise moved across the CEO's face. Yes, I continued. I know about that. And yes, I know why. I clicked the remote and a screen illuminated behind me. Graphs, timelines, reports. This company was built on innovation, I continued. But somewhere along the way, leadership shifted focus, from building value to protecting seats. No one spoke. The restructuring wasn't about improving operations, I said softly. It was about eliminating challenge, eliminating dissent, eliminating anyone who remembered how the company was built. Brandon exhaled sharply, defensive. Now wait. No, I cut in, firm, not loud. You will have time to speak, but right now, you will listen. His mouth closed, and this time, he stayed quiet. I clicked again. A new slide. Turnover statistics. Compensation disparities. Executive bonuses during layoffs. Mia's team listed among the lowest paid departments. This board has forgotten the most basic principle of leadership, I said. People don't work for companies, they work for people they trust. For the first time, the CEO looked directly at me. Not angry, but exposed. So here's what will happen. I placed both hands on the table. Effective immediately, all ongoing restructuring will pause. An independent audit will begin, focusing on financial decisions and compliance. Elaine nodded. Approval, not obligation. We will also begin department evaluations, not to eliminate roles, but to understand what support has been ignored. A few board members shifted, uncomfortable. Good. Growth was never comfortable. And finally, I added, HR will no longer report exclusively to executive leadership. They will report to the board, specifically through me, until ethical standards are confirmed. The CEO's jaw tightened. You're dismantling the system, she murmured. I met her eyes, steady, unflinching. No, I said softly. I'm rebuilding the one we promised when we hired people who believed in us. For a long moment, the room held still. Not resistance, not acceptance. Just processing. Then Elaine spoke quietly, almost with relief. Motion to proceed under Daisy's outlined mandate? Hands raised, one by one, even the CEO's. Brandon's was the last, slow, reluctant, but it lifted motion past. As the room emptied, Elaine paused beside me. You know, she said, most people who get power this suddenly use it to destroy. I looked at her. Maybe that's why most leaders aren't remembered for the right reasons. She smiled. Not big, not soft, just real. We'll see who you become. I nodded once. We will. Because tomorrow wasn't going to be the fight. It would be the rebuild. And rebuilds always revealed the truth. Who deserved power and who only wanted it. 3 weeks later, the company looked the same from the outside. Same glass windows, same navy blue lobby, same front desk orchid that somehow never died. But inside, everything had shifted. The audit confirmed what most employees already suspected. Selective promotions, favoritism, silenced complaints, and financial decisions that benefited a handful at the top while entire departments struggled. No crimes. Nothing criminally prosecutable. Just something worse. Neglect. The kind of leadership that drains potential. Not with violence, but with indifference. And cleaning that up wasn't exciting. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't a dramatic boardroom explosion like the day everything changed. It was paperwork meetings, listening, uncomfortable truths. The real work began after the shock wore off. On a rainy Thursday morning, the final audit report was delivered to the board. Elaine opened the meeting. Today, she said, we vote on whether Daisy remains in permanent leadership capacity as chair and acting CEO. No dramatics, no raised voices, just procedure. Brandon looked different, flatter somehow, like someone removed the scaffolding holding up his ego. He hadn't spoken much since the clause activated. The CEO sat beside him, still sharp, still composed, but quieter. I didn't speak until the floor opened. When you fired me, I began, you didn't do it because I failed. No one interrupted. You did it because I made you uncomfortable. The CEO's expression tightened. Not in anger, but recognition. You wanted someone compliant, I continued. Someone who wouldn't question decisions. Someone who would sign silently and disappear when it was convenient. I paused. But companies don't survive on compliance. They survive on integrity. The room remained still, absorbing that truth. Then I placed a single sheet of paper at the center of the table. My decision, I said, is not to remove either of you. Both heads snapped up. Brandon blinked. The CEO looked stunned. People make bad decisions when they're afraid, I continued. This company has been operating in fear. Fear of financial losses, fear of accountability, fear of change. I met each board member's eyes. So instead of punishment, we rebuild culture. Transparency, shared leadership, ethical operations. Elaine exhaled. Not relief exactly, but respect. You want reform, she said quietly. No, I corrected. I want accountability and growth. Voting began. One by one, hands lifted, steadier than before. When it came to Brandon, he hesitated, then finally said, yes. Soft, but real. The CEO lifted her hand last. Not because she resisted, but because she was processing something heavier. This company wasn't slipping through her fingers. It was finally becoming what she once hoped it could be, before ego, pressure, and ambition distorted it. Yes, she said. Motion passed. Unanimous. After the meeting, most people filtered out quickly. Politics exhausted them, but the CEO remained seated. She finally looked at me. Not as a threat, not as a rival, but as an equal. You could have ended my career, she said. I nodded. Yes. And you didn't. I don't believe leadership should behave like revenge. She let out a breath. Then why fight back at all? I considered my answer carefully. Because silence teaches people how to treat you. A slow, genuine smile tugged at her mouth. Not approval, but understanding. You're going to be good at this, she said. I already am, I replied. Not boastful, just true. On my way out, I passed Mia in the hallway, sorting through spreadsheets and highlighters. She straightened when she saw me. Everything okay? She asked cautiously. I smiled. For the first time, I said. Yes. She nodded. Slow, hopeful, good. We needed someone who sees us. Not manages, not uses, not survives through us. Sees us. Her words stayed with me long after she walked away. Later that evening, I stood in my office, my actual office now, and watched the city through rain-speckled glass. I thought about that text message, the one meant to erase me. Daisy, your contract was terminated this morning. Leave. Funny. It was the message that pushed everything into motion. The message that forced a system built on fear and silence to finally face itself. The message that reminded me of the most important truth I'd forgotten. Power isn't given. Power is claimed. And sometimes, power is reclaimed. At 9 a.m., they tried to end my story. By 1 p.m., I wasn't just still here. I owned the narrative, and I wasn't going anywhere.